Welcome back, everyone. We have Zach Cherian back on the show. I loved the first episode that we did together. It was tons of fun. Zach shared amazing information with us. I learned a lot from that, and we're so fortunate to have him back on the show. For those who did not see the first episode, um, Zach Cherian has been in the industry for 25 years and he's worked with some of the most prominent companies in the world like GE, Agilent, HSBC. He's a certified CPHR and he is written a book that he does not recommend. I will let Zach add anything else you want to add to the introduction.
Not much, except Sean. I loved our last podcast together. It was a great discussion. It's funny when you have fun with these things, how time flies. And as you can see, I'm inspired, and I've stepped up my game. So this time I'm wearing a jacket and
I
all
love
that.
it.
So
I love it, but I'm missing the vest. So whatever I lost, you gained.
yes,
I
no,
love
looking
it.
forward to it. Yeah, looking forward to talking today as well.
Fantastic. I know that you've been in this industry for a very long time and you've witnessed the evolution of the HR world. Um, I think one of the most important generations that you're working with and have taken up a big portion of the work market are millennials. Um, what trends have you been seeing with millennials? Are there um, any trends that have to change or are changing? What is your advice to millennials in general?
Yes, well, let me start maybe with a little bit of sort of history on this.
Hmm.
For our listeners, this whole thing about generational differences came into effect many, many years back. I mean, I want to say, I don't know, 15 years back, there were baby movers and Gen X and Gen Y and Gen Z and so on and so forth, right? It seems like every few years there's a gen getting added. And with that, immediately there was sort of like a explosion of theories around the fact that every generation needs a different kind of leader or leadership style. And I have to say, a lot of it was just a lot of hype. Um, I mean, for example, Gen X's need different leadership than Gen Y's, and I feel like a lot of people did not stop and ask why. Why do they need different leaders? Why can't the same leaders,
Hmm.
manage both generations, right? And it sort of became a sort of movement to find the generational differences and to find the leadership style that will work for the generational differences. And you had papers and articles and so on and so forth. I think we've come around a circle or the full circle, and now we realize there's not that much difference, right, in the way we lead people, right? I mean, everybody likes to be led with respect. Everybody likes managers who are interested in their development. Everybody likes to be coached. Everybody likes to be heard, etc. So the foundational leadership principles have not at all changed across generations. Maybe there's a top 5% of things that do change, and leaders need to be aware of that. But I have to say, that's just the tip of the iceberg. If you're a leader of Gen X, you can be a leader of a Gen Y. You can be a leader of a Gen Z. You can be a leader of a baby boomer. As
Hmm.
long as you are a leader who leads with respect and influence, right? And so, in fact, now there is enough research and literature that shows there isn't that much of a difference in how we need to lead different generations. So,
Hmm.
it's one of those things that became a hype and hype and hype, and everybody, wanted to add to the hype. But
Right.
it's just something that we as leaders and human resource professional, we should ask the question before getting on a hype is what is happening? Really, what is the truth, right? Is there really a difference and so on? Back to your question, back to your question about what would I advise, the more sort of younger generations. is just, be open to learning and be open to teaching. There are things that every generation can learn from a previous generation, and there are things that every generation can teach the previous generation, right? And so let's just be open about those things, right? I would be very, very careful to say things like this particular generation is more technology savvy. I personally don't believe that. I think everybody's technology savvy if they want to be, right? I would be
Mm-hmm.
very careful to say things like this generation is more loyal. No, I don't
Mm-hmm.
think so. I think everybody is loyal,
Right,
We
yeah.
just have to tap into their motivation, right? And so instead of making large statements about each generation, let's look at what doesn't change. What doesn't change is respectful leadership, coaching, development, empowerment, safety, security, well-being. These things don't change. And so if you're a leader wondering, how do I manage different generations? My advice is don't think about it. Be yourself, do the right things right, and you'll be fine.
Right, 100%. You made a really good point about um, professionals who um, they have a desire for self-improvement through learning. Um,
Absolutely.
there's a lot of companies that do invest in uh, their employees' professional um, development, and there's a lot of companies that don't. Um, what sort of trends, and I know we touched on this in the last episode, and we talked about a lot of great stuff in the world of um, learning and how companies can provide their employees with a platform so they can professionally develop themselves. Um, is there is there any prominent platforms that companies can access um, that they can use to train their employees as opposed to building their own?
Um, yeah, I mean, as we discussed briefly last time, the world of learning technologies evolved quite a bit. LMSs have become better and better. LXPs have entered the sort of the space, and there's so many LXPs which are really, really good. Uh, there are there are technologies or platforms that help nudge learners. So you've come out of a learning intervention, let's say a classroom session, and you'll have a software that
Mm-hmm.
reminds you of what you learned, let's say for the next 6 months, and asks you how you're doing. So learning has evolved quite a bit. Obviously, each of these is an investment in terms of money, and each company has to make its decision about what to be invest in. As you know, there are mentoring platforms which will match mentor to mentee and get all that going, etc. And so I think we're not anymore um, at a lack of technology. If anything, we have lots of technology.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we are not even at the at a place where there's a lack of content. There's huge amount of content, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there is more content than a person can complete in a lifetime, right? And so the
Right.
role of the learning um, advisor or partner or L&D person or human resource business partner is not is not so much to make all of this accessible,
Mm-hmm.
but recommend the right thing, right? So for example,
Right.
let's say I've got all the technology in the world, but it is full of content which I don't even have time to look
Mm-hmm.
at. I mean, if I go on online, I go to YouTube and say, give me, show me material on coaching. Oh, you get a million videos. So the problem is not the content. The content is there. It's which one's the best for me, right? And so somehow the learning team of a company needs to help customize that content to the
Mm-hmm.
person and say, listen, this is probably the best for you, go for it. And
Right.
if it is not, here's two or three more suggestions, but not a million suggestions, right? And
Gotcha.
so I think it becomes helpful. So the curation of learning has become more and more important. And for learning and human resource professionals to curate appropriately,
Mm-hmm.
they need to know the business enough.
I love it. One common problem that I've had with company owners and some higher level executives is they say, "What if what if I train my employee and they leave?" And I always tell them, what if you don't train them and they stay?
That's right.
Um, I think a lot of entrepreneurs or business owners don't see the value in training, but I think that um, you're going to be in a worse position if you don't train your employee and your employee stayed, and especially in a lot of industries, your employees are the first line of
Yeah.
first line where they interface with the client, right? And they're the face of the client, and if they're not trained properly, then that can reflect negatively
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
company
and
itself.
that's right. And again, back to technology and processes and so on and so forth. I think much more important than that is the culture of learning, right? A
Hmm.
learning lead. Yes, it's important to make investments in learning technology and processes and so on, but the best investment that we can make is in creating a learning culture. And a, and one part of that is just making sure that people understand the value of investing 10 to 20% of their weekly time, monthly time in learning. If
Hmm.
everybody in the company desires to learn, learning will happen. Whether you
Hmm.
have an LXP or you don't have an LXP, right?
Right.
Whether you have fancy technology or you don't have fancy technology. If I want to learn, I'll find a way to learn,
I
right?
love this
Mm.
point. And so when you're interviewing or when you're recruiting, is that one of the things you look for in an employee, the desire to want to learn?
Indeed. I mean,
Hmm.
that is one of those. I don't know. I don't remember, Sean, if you and I spoke about sort of like the below the surface skills. There are some personality
Hmm.
traits or skills that if a person has, those influence other skills, right? And a desire to learn influences a lot of other skills. So if a person has the desire to learn, they'll learn themselves, they'll invest the time, they'll help others learn, they will open avenues for it, and they'll
Hmm.
learn other skills over a period of time. So yes, we must do that because you can't I mean, no company will have a large enough training team to micromanage everybody's training and learning needs and skills assessment and so on and so forth, right? You have to make sure that people are self-starters, especially when
Hmm.
it comes to their learning. So it would be an amazing thing to check for that when you're hiring someone, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right, 100%. Um, I know we spoke about performance reviews,
Uh-huh.
and there's multiple different ways of producing performance reviews. One that we spoke about was relative ranking. Can you explain a little bit more what relative ranking is and whether it's productive or not?
Um, Relative ranking, as far as I know, was made popular, at least as far as I know. Theoretically, this may be wrong, but what I know is General Electric made this really popular, where
Mm-hmm.
if you have 10 people in the team, uh, one or two of them had to be relatively ranked below, let's say, expectation, and the majority, 7 people or so, had to be ranked at expectation, and one or two people had to be ranked above expectation. So your ranking is relative. So you have sort of like a bell curve of ranking, average, below, and above. And what that helped achieve was it gave uh, companies, and I'm not now talking about GE, but the companies that did adopt relative ranking, it gave those companies sort of a way to distribute rewards. So if you have $1,000 to distribute at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the year as incentive or rewards, you could say, okay, we're going to do relative ranking. Those who are below and not performed will not get anything. Those who are average will get the average, and those who are above average will get more than the average. And so it was a very good way of, uh, it was a good tool to help distribute rewards. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And then a few
Right.
years back, many companies, sorry, let me backtrack. So that was happening for so many years. One of the one of the requirements of such a process is you must have managers who have the skill and ability to tell people that, listen, you are you did not perform well last year. You're
Mm-hmm.
below. You're in that below the average, you know, bucket. It's always easy to tell people that you're above average, right? Okay, you're above average. I'm giving you a great increment. You know, everybody's happy. But this system requires managers to have the courage to do bold, honest conversations about
Mm-hmm.
performance. That became a problem, right? And so you'd have so many managers saying, oh no, I really don't have anybody below average. Everybody's at or above average. And you'd have this constant year-end struggle between managers and human resource, and that was going on. And then a few years back, a few companies decided, let's just eliminate this whole relative ranking thing, and let's not do any relative ranking.
Mm-hmm.
I think where I think those who could do it well, power to them. I have found companies who did did not really eliminate it. They stopped doing it in front of the employee. Like, employees were not told where they were ranked,
Mm-hmm.
but in spreadsheets and PowerPoint presentations, everybody was still going through a relative ranking. Names were, put here and there in order to distribute rewards, right? It did not take away the problem, because at the end of the day, if you're still going to do relative ranking, even if you don't show it, and you're going to use that as a basis for reward distribution, you still have to go back to the employees and say, I'm giving you X amount because you're a good performer or not a good performer, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
you still required managers to have courageous conversations. And so what I find now, and I can't say this for most companies, but what I find now with few companies is they are now going back to the relative ranking, and they're saying, well, that actually, yes, we need managers to be able to deliver bad news to few employees,
Mm-hmm.
but we need this system because that's makes it a little more logical. The message
Right.
is not whether relative ranking is good or not. The message is, don't do something just because some other companies have done it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't change something just because some other companies have changed it. Don't get on the hype bandwagon just
Right.
because it's a hype bandwagon. Think about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
For example, there's quite a lot of discussion, I believe, these days about pay transparency. Is it good or bad? No idea. I don't have an opinion. My only advice is, don't do it because it's happening. Do
Mm-hmm.
it because for your business it will make sense. If not, think about it, right? And
Right.
so I think, again, we've to sort of discern, uh, uh, all of these things. If you just get on the hype bandwagon, these can become large projects, and at the end of the project you say, well, project well done, etc. So don't just do it because it's another project, right?
Right.
If it helps the company, great. If it is not going to make any difference, don't do it. If it's just going to change the problem from one way to another way, if it's just going to change the face of the problem, don't do it, right?
Yeah.
And so just think about it. I think we just have to be a little more, um, how do I say, a little more, um, real about it.
Right. Yeah, I think it's important to have a tailored solution as opposed to just follow the crowd. Um, and the follow the crowd does happen with companies who are trying to uh, uh, implement ranking, and they've heard about it, they have an idea about it, but they actually don't know how to implement it. So I've seen companies that they want to come up with an idea of a KPI, but in formulating their KPI, they incorporate the wrong parameters, and
Right.
that can put good employees in a pretty bad position.
Yeah.
So